Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are handing out a $38 trillion reality check. We're diving straight into the staggeringly massive numbers behind the United States debt crisis. And look, this isn't just about some abstract high-level economics, right? It's about the harsh, completely unavoidable mathematical trade-offs required to fix a system that is literally bleeding cash. We are going to look strictly at the data, the raw numbers, and the reality of what it'll actually take to get things back on track.
To really wrap our heads around the situation, I want you to imagine a guy going through a massive midlife crisis. But instead of a nasty divorce and buying a brand new Corvette, the US government is blowing trillions of dollars on healthcare programs, tanks, and monthly checks for 70 million retirees. And unlike a normal midlife crisis that you might fix with a little therapy and maybe a new gym membership, this one is entirely different. Why? Because we actually have to live through the financial consequences of it, year after grueling year.
Because of this massive spending habit, we're essentially acting like a college freshman who just got their first credit card and has absolutely no concept of consequences. We are currently running a nearly $2 trillion annual shortfall. So, what do we do when we don't have the cash? Well, we just borrow the difference every single year. This habit is exactly why the national debt has exploded past $38 trillion. It's a number so huge it almost feels made up, but I assure you, it is very, very real.
Before we go any further, it's absolutely crucial to understand the difference between the debt and the deficit. Think of a deficit like an unprofitable business. A deficit happens when the government spends more than it collects in a single year. The United States has been operating unprofitably, running a deficit every single year since 2001. And since 2020, we've been running trillion-dollar deficits annually, like it's our new national pastime. To fix the problem, we first have to understand the real scope of our spending.
Which brings us to Section 1, where the money actually goes. All government spending basically falls into three main buckets. First up is mandatory spending. This is locked in by law, things like Social Security and Medicare. It acts a lot like your rent, you just have to pay it. Next is discretionary spending, like defense and education, which Congress chooses yearly and politicians absolutely love to fight over. Finally, we have net interest. This is strictly non-negotiable. It's simply the bill we owe for all the previous bills we didn't pay. Now this is the real gut punch. Nearly 70% of the entire federal budget is eaten up by just 5 massive line items: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, national defense, and interest. Everything else the government does, literally the whole rest of the shebang, is basically pocket change compared to those 5 massive giants.
This frames a very common debate we hear all the time. People love to argue online about cutting foreign aid to balance the budget. In 2024, the U.S. spent $78 billion on foreign aid. Sounds like a lot, right? But that is just 1% of the budget. If we cut foreign aid completely to zero, just wiped it out entirely, it would only buy us 19 days of Social Security payments. 19 days! And then we are right back to borrowing.
So the crucial takeaway here is this. Trying to fix the deficit by eliminating small things like foreign aid is just trimming around the edges. It's exactly like trying to lose weight by switching from regular Coke to Diet Coke. It doesn't really matter, because guess what? You're still eating at McDonald's. To make a real difference, we have to address the massive root causes.
Let's move on to Section 2, the National Defense Dilemma.
This simple process of elimination leaves us with only 2 real options to address the massive deficit. The first option is tackling our discretionary spending heavyweight, cutting national defense. The U.S. spends around $850 billion annually on defense. That makes up 13% of the entire federal budget. To put that into perspective for you, the United States spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. And yes, that includes China, Russia, and Germany.
However, national defense acts as a sort of national emotional support blanket. If you even suggest cutting it, people immediately imagine paratroopers landing on their roofs. In a world with rising global tensions and pretty chaotic international affairs, cutting defense is a highly unlikely and an incredibly sticky political issue. Very few elected officials want to be the one who slashed military spending.
So that leads us to Section 3, fixing the big 3.
Since defense cuts are highly unlikely, we must attack the untouchable giants of mandatory spending. This right here is the Mount Everest of our budget challenges. We're talking about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These 3 giants combined make up $3 trillion, which is a staggering 44% of the yearly federal budget. They cover millions upon millions of Americans, but if you look at the insolvency dates for these programs, 2 of them are rapidly hurtling towards a mathematical brick wall.
And honestly, this is the terrifying part.
If we do absolutely nothing, if Congress just twiddles its thumbs and ignores the problem, the law mandates automatic benefit cuts when those trust funds run dry. That means an automatic 11% cut for Medicare in 2033 and a devastating 20% automatic cut for Social Security by 2034. Doing nothing doesn't save these programs. It actively destroys them.
So how do we actually fix Social Security mathematically without playing politics? Well, the data presents two clear options. First, we could eliminate the payroll tax cap. Right now, individuals only owe Social Security taxes on their first $170,000 of income. Eliminating that cap would close about 73% of the funding shortfall all by itself. The second option is adjusting eligibility. I mean, does a billionaire like Warren Buffett really need a monthly Social Security check? Adjusting benefits for extremely high-income retirees could significantly ease the burden.
For Medicare, the math is actually pretty similar. Raising the combined Medicare payroll tax rate by just one single point could generate over $1 trillion in the next 10 years. On top of that, data from the Center for American Progress shows that private Medicare Advantage plans are currently overpaid by 22 to 39%. Reforming that system to align with real costs could stop between $1 and $2 trillion in total waste over the next decade. That's a real game changer.
Finally, we have Medicaid, which doesn't technically go insolvent but still costs over $600 billion a year. The mathematical fix here is straightforward. Crack down hard on fraud and improper payments. Right now, data errors, overpayments, and eligibility errors eat up over 5% of all Medicaid spending. Fixing these administrative and fraudulent errors alone could save the government tens of billions of dollars every single year.
Let's wrap up with Section 4, the cost of doing nothing.
Let's see how all of this builds into the broader economic picture if America just says, screw it, we'll deal with this whole debt thing later. If we ignore the problem, we trigger a massive economic domino effect. Since we run an annual deficit, the government has to keep borrowing. But investors aren't dumb. If they see a country borrowing trillions with zero plan to fix it, they view that as high risk. To compensate for that risk, they demand higher returns. And that directly forces the interest rate at which the U.S. borrows to rise.
And this right here is why it matters directly to you. A $38 trillion national debt doesn't just stay abstractly on some spreadsheet in Washington. Higher federal borrowing rates mean higher rates for literally everything. It directly chokes the economy in slow motion by making your mortgage, your car loan, your business loans, and your credit card rates significantly more expensive. After looking at all the data, the spreadsheets, and the charts, the stark reality of this explainer is this. There is no perfect, painless solution to our budget crisis. We absolutely cannot just trim around the edges to fix a $2 trillion annual hole. There are only trade-offs and sacrifices.
The clock is ticking loudly, and as we've seen, doing nothing leads to automatic cuts and an economy completely choked by skyrocketing interest rates. Doing nothing is simply no longer an option. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Knowing the strict mathematical reality of the budget, and knowing that some level of pain is totally inevitable, which trade-offs are you willing to accept to save our financial future?